Hello and welcome. My name is Emily Prieto, and I'm the co-host of the Seeds of Tao podcast alongside my husband, Joshua Prieto. We're also the co-owners of the Seeds of Tao education platform, an incubator for regenerative entrepreneurs. If you're new to the podcast, this is a podcast for impact entrepreneurs creating regenerative enterprises. We often get asked what exactly a regenerative enterprise or impact entrepreneur is. So if you're wondering, a regenerative enterprise builds triple bottom line profits through the practice of ethics and principles that lead to a more inclusive, fair, and balanced economy. Impact entrepreneurs, or regenpreneurs, as we sometimes like to call them, are those willing and able to take on the financial and personal risks of starting and building regenerative enterprises. You'll get to know exactly what all that means as you join us for this and future episodes, but know that we welcome everyone to join us as we work to build regenerative economies together. That's exactly why we are here doing what we do at Seeds of Tao. Our mission is to help establish regenerative economies in every bioregion by serving individual regenpreneurs like yourself. In this podcast, you'll hear the startup stories in all their glory from impact entrepreneurs all over the globe. You'll learn and grow the skills of building a regenerative enterprise from your peers, mentors, and leaders. Finally, we'll get to know each other as you engage in the podcast and join the wonderful Regenerative Business Economies Network, aka RegenBen, an open community where peers, colleagues, funders, allies, and supporters of regenpreneurs come together to build and the regenerative economies of the future. Join us every month for a wonderful episode as we collectively move beyond sustainability and into our regenerative future. It all starts now.
Hello and welcome to the Seeds of Tao podcast. I have Sarah Spencer with me today. It's lovely to have you, Sarah. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you.
And you're across the pond, so to speak, right? I know that's a saying. It's good to have you. Tell us where you're calling in from, so we have an understanding.
I'm in Derbyshire, in the middle of the UK. So we're just about as farthest from the sea as you could possibly get in the UK, which is an island. So, but it's a good sort of 2-3 hours from the sea. So, this time of year, I really miss that.
That's really interesting because I always think everywhere you go is near some type of ocean, right? I still have not yet visited. But yeah, so we're in two different places. It seems like it should be spring or coming into a good spring now.
Yeah, coming into summer. We've had a really cold, late spring actually this year, but we have got some sunshine now. But just recently, in the last few years with climate change, we've had really big changes in our weather. We've had long spells of drought and then long spells of rain. So it's quite different from the climate that I grew up in, really.
Yeah. So it's your day, but what got you up this morning? That's one question we always ask. What got you up this morning? And then like the second part of that, what gets you excited to do the work that you do?
So, what got me up this morning was actually quite unusual because normally my dogs get me up, but this morning, for some reason, the dogs decided to have a lie-in. So that was really lovely because I'm in the middle of a book at the moment called The Wild Silence by Raina Wynn. She wrote The Salt Path, which was like a big bestseller, all about walking the Cornwall coast path after they were made homeless. And this is her follow-up. And so I was just able to pick that up this morning before the dogs woke up. So I had this sort of really idyllic start to the day when actually my day was a day of tech nightmares was calling, of which this is not one of them, but other tech nightmares. And, so actually to pick up a book for just 20 minutes was just absolute heaven. And it's a book about nature. So it's just right up my street.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. I often don't get the chance to just pick up a book and read. So it is one of those times that though I love to do it. So great. You got to wake up and then you got some tech challenges. We were kind of talking about that earlier before the podcast. So I know I know what you're working on, but the audience doesn't know. Could you share just what gets you excited to do the work that you do and share more about what you're doing?
Yeah, well, I've always been really kind of passionate about looking at the challenges of the world, really, and having my eyes open, really, for, from an early age and all my life, really, and just actually thinking we must be able to do something about this. And what I'm really passionate about is sort of supporting people, and that might be as individuals, or it might be as leaders, business owners, entrepreneurs. And then also I want to do good for the planet as well. And what I've discovered over the last many years is this fantastic thing of regenerative, which combines both. So you've got the biosphere element, plus you've got the people element, and it all makes perfect sense because, of course, everything's connected when you look out your window. So my work is called either Think Like a Tree, which is for individuals, or Think Like a Forest. And it is regenerative work, but we very much have an accent on learning directly from nature. So as you know, regenerative, has nature inspired elements where we kind of learn from nature's wisdom. Mm-hmm. But I'm really passionate to ensure that doesn't stay in a textbook or in some academic papers about systems thinking, of which I've read many. So, don't get me wrong, I love a good textbook. But, I think there's no better way to learn for entrepreneurs and business owners, leaders and individuals than actually getting out in the forest, just touching the bark of a tree and just observing really what's around, and that way of sort of experiential learning to take that back into the business is just, incredibly important, but it also really shortcuts a lot of things. So a lot of things that you think are going to be quite tricky and big challenges that we all have as business owners, entrepreneurs. Somehow when you go out in the forest and observe how nature does it, it all just falls into place. And that's what I love, is actually being that person that can, be that facilitator between the entrepreneur and nature itself to say, hey, look, I'm just showing you the way, but nature's actually the one with the answers.
I deeply respect that methodology of learning from nature, and so just to ask a couple questions around that, what is it in a lot of ways, when we're learning from nature, it's really subtle, I feel, right? But when I'm applying it to my business, I go out and is this for farmers that are really working with nature, or businesses that have a really strong nature tie? Or is it for all of us that have businesses that maybe, revolve around being in a desk or in front of a computer or in an office? What type of... How does it work
it's absolutely for every type of business. So, I've got experience with land-based businesses, and I have land here myself. And I've set up a couple of social enterprises that have used this, that have been land-based. But also I work with organisations that have no particular connection with the land. And the principles that nature shares are relevant whether you're designing a project, a product, and most of the people are either office or factory based, that it's equally relevant to whether you're actually just producing food out on the land. So the things like, give an example. So we've heard of circular economy, but circular economy is basically based on the principles of nature, how nature cycles and recycles everything. So there's no bin collection in a forest, there's no waste, there's no toxicity. Everything that is the waste product of one organism gets used and recycled by another. And what that does is actually kind of grows the health of the whole. So it provides nutrients for, for other organisms or for the original organism itself. So that cycling of energy and resources can equally be looked at in terms of a product. So instead of having this sort of take, make, use, lose model where we're just buying stuff, selling it at the cheapest price using the cheapest, most harmful materials, and then it gets, ends up washing up on somebody's beach. Then instead of that, by learning from nature, we think, okay, so how can we use resources in the first place that are not going to be toxic when their life is ended? Maybe they then become a resource for another company who then takes that resource and makes something else with them. So they either become food or they become, another resource for another organization. And this is where another element of the learning from nature comes in, which is collaboration. So nature is fantastic at collaboration, yes. As we well know, and I think often in our businesses we can be quite scared of collaboration because we've just had it. I mean, I did an economics degree. We just have it drummed into us that it's all about competition, and that's the survival of the fittest, and all of these falsehoods, really. So yes, there is competition in a forest, but also what we see is that the biggest kind of leaps in evolution have come through collaboration. So if you take that idea of circular products, then if you actually create, as they have done in some places, kind of zones where you zone organizations together so that the waste from one becomes a resource from another, and they're all operating sort of nearby to each other, then you can see that you've got the circular element you've learned from nature, you've got the collaboration you've learned from nature. You may well have the flat hierarchical, non-hierarchical structures that we see in nature. So hierarchies and power dominance over is much more of a human thing than something that we see. So, regenerative organizations can think about how they can empower people that are working at all levels of the organization and flatten that structure so that they can maximize the opportunities for innovation. And then when they see that, oh yeah, there's, somebody's got a resource, what could we do with that? Then the culture of the organization allows for that potential and that innovation to arise. So this is where we see that this is not just about the outer aspects of a company or organization. This is about an inner journey as well, because if you can't have the culture, if you don't have the empowerment of everybody, really, and the structures and the meetings and processes to allow that potential to emerge, then you're really dampening down a huge amount of opportunity that an organization could be tapping into. And I also see these that kind of same correlation of that competitive. There is the competitive in nature, but there's the cooperative in nature, and then also being able to see when the right rates of growth from nature, right? When we get too big, maybe, or when we have to grow towards a different direction, and we can all these can exist in patterns in nature, and we can learn from nature. So that's beautiful, and I kind of subscribe to a couple of thoughts when this topic comes to mind, and what you're talking about. I think of I take time every day at least to go sit in nature, right? And what that allows me to do, and I'm sure maybe this is a part of it, and let me know if I'm wrong. To be able to... absolutely, yeah. So we need to have that connection element before we can then take that next step to the actual learning from nature. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
And just that, what that affords me, right? If it's working out in the garden, or just I try to find like a sit spot, right? And I sit down and I just observe and I listen and I see I'm starting to become more of a birder here in Panama. It's such a wonderful place to be a birder, to kind of recognize. But I start like the things that I'm working out in my head, and when I give it that type of space in nature, it's different. Like when I give it space in my bed at night and it just keeps me up, versus like I go out in nature and I give it space there where the ideas come in, right? And ways of working through things seem to come into
absolutely
place.
And there are lots of different mechanisms at play when you do that. So there are the it's been shown through studies that just the smell of being in nature changes our physiology, so you're immediately putting yourself in a different physiological state. And interestingly, they've shown that you'll be in a different physiological state if you're in a different type of woodland. So for example, a pine forest has a different physiological reaction in us than a deciduous forest. Now I'm talking about the UK here, because I don't know, the type of forests in your part of the world are probably a bit more a bit less different in terms of seasons and things like that. But so you're having this physiological change which allows you to be calmer, more receptive, more open to ideas. So we're getting ourselves out of that like fight or flight that we're often in like the modern world, especially when we're so and myself included, kind of reliant on tech and the stresses that are just those drip stresses. I'm not talking about the big stresses of life. I'm just talking about the just general everyday stuff. But nature's an antidote to that. But then we've also got what we find when we take teams out in nature is that they look at things differently. They communicate differently. They look at their organization from that more of a designer mentality, and they're kind of like, oh, isn't that really obvious? Why have we been doing it like that? And somehow when you're learning from trees and out in nature, it what seemed really insurmountable suddenly seems kind of like the answers are right there. So that's what I really love about, that kind of opening up. And what we help people do as well is take what we call a designer's approach, but it's also a big picture and a long-term approach as well. So just changing the whole horizons of how people look at their businesses, so instead of just thinking about, the next 3 month, goal of we've got to achieve this. Suddenly, when you're in nature, you can think about that long-term impact. And of course, when we're thinking about long-term impact, then we've got so much more opportunity to actually influence the whole biosphere in terms of, thinking about the good that we can do in the world.
Let's take a moment for a promotional break to tell you about a course Seeds of Tao has just released in its beta form. The entrepreneurs that listen to this podcast want to see change. We want to be the change, and we want to bring that change. We want to change the culture from an extractive and degenerative one into a permanent regenerative one, a culture that cares for its people, planet, and future. This is the reason why so many entrepreneurs we talk to at Seeds of Tao start regenerative enterprises. They don't do it for the money. They do it because they want to see change. The challenge is that it's hard to build a business, especially a regenerative one, that is the catalyst for change. I often interview and speak with individuals that have managed to build a business and livelihood from their passion. And they often tell me that they wish they could do more, or they feel like their efforts aren't enough. They want to scale their efforts and the efforts of others, but they don't know how. Don't we all feel this way sometimes? We see our neighbors, industry, peers, suppliers, producers falling further into degenerative practices, and we think, I've made the change. Why can't they? How can I get them to change? We know it's hard to change, and for some, it's harder than others. We also know that we can't change others, only ourselves. We can, however, pave the way for change and make it easier for the next person to be that change. That path always starts with a story. Seeds of Tao has launched its first online course for regenerative entrepreneurs, and its objective is to help you pave the way to regenerative change through the power of your brand story. You'll learn to naturally grow and scale your business using brand storytelling and other inherent marketing systems that have stood the test of time. As you do this, you'll learn to do it in a way that influences change, not forcing change. No, we should never do that. It never works. Nor should we manipulate, even though it's an unethical way to make things work. Let's be a positive influence through the story and the message that we put out. The course is called the StorySeed, and it's the first of 6 initial courses we're releasing to help regenerative entrepreneurs build the regenerative economies of the future. The first 500 students to enroll in StorySeed will gain lifetime access to this course and the other 5 courses in our initial catalog. To give you an idea of what some of those courses will be, in addition to StorySeed, which covers marketing and messaging, we're building a funding and finance course and a course that helps you navigate the cultural forces and flows that you face as you create systematic and cultural change in your industry. On top of lifetime access to the Pando Academy course catalog, you'll be able to join us for weekly office hours, utilize step-by-step action workbooks, get discounted prices on other offerings, and other amazing benefits. This is a beta offering, which means you're helping us pioneer an education platform and accelerator for regenerative entrepreneurs. If you're an innovator and early adopter building a regenerative enterprise, come pioneer this with us by following the promotional link in the description or show notes and enrolling in StorySeed. Okay, let's get back to the episode.
It sets a different perspective because nature works on a different time scale too. And so when you're out in it, it can also help us. Oh, I love it's making me want to go out and have a little time in nature right now, actually. So I want to kind of take us into a bit of a storytelling mode now to hear more about how you got involved in this work. What got you to do this work, teaching people through nature and teaching personal, helping people in their personal lives, but also helping people in their organizations and businesses.
Yeah, so it's kind of a bit of a circuitous route, really, because I started off as a human rights lawyer. Actually, I worked as a legal representative for refugees and asylum seekers for many years, and absolutely loved that work. And I think there are actually a lot of parallels in that work to what I do now, in the sense of, like I say, wanting to do good in the world. But even back then, I started. Then it was already obvious that there were actually climate refugees happening, and that was going to be the one of the next biggest kind of humanitarian crises, which of course we're seeing in reality now with people migrating due to climate. So environment was always on my radar, even back in that previous career. And I grew up in the English countryside and just loved being outdoors and, in the woods, climbing trees and making dens and that kind of thing. Then 20 years ago, it's actually 20 years ago last month, my family bought a small holding here in South Derbyshire. So when the children were quite little, I've got 3 children, and we bought this piece of land that over that time we've planted up with orchards and grow food. We've had various animals over the years. We've planted forests and done a lot of things here. And through that, I discovered permaculture and did my permaculture training. So I did the initial sort of permaculture design certificate course, and then went on to do a diploma in applied permaculture design. And alongside that, I also set up a couple of community social enterprises. I trained as a forest school leader. I did lots of eco school stuff with my children's schools. So the big project that I kind of co-initiated was the permaculture designer for was Whistlewood Common, which is a a 10-acre community woodland social enterprise where a group of people got together and bought 10 acres of land, raised the money through a share offer, a community share offer. And then I did a kind of big consultation and drew up this permaculture design, and then we planted that up. And that's just celebrating its 10th anniversary this year.
Cool.
And what I realized was that it was really important to actually not only design and co-design the land, but actually what the success of the organization was going to be, the project was going to be, to actually think about the organization, how the people worked with that. And of course, in permaculture, we have 3 ethics. We have earth care, we have people care, and we have fair shares. So, that was always there in that permaculture design, to think about the organization. And so, that was all going on, and really, really exciting. And then about it was back in 2015 when all of that was kind of really active. I had a massive health crash. I have a genetic illness, which wasn't diagnosed at the time, but I knew that I'd known for years that there was something not quite right, but no doctors could get to the bottom of it. So I had this huge health crash, and spent about a year or 18 months in bed, and it really led me to totally rethink the way that I was living, really, because what I'd been doing was a lot of work with outdoor work that was physically demanding, and so what I did was I turned to the permaculture principles and delved a lot deeper into the people side of permaculture and other nature-inspired systems. And I basically then designed a roadmap back to health, and then ended up having a diagnosis, or several diagnoses actually, but all thanks to this process, really, this design process that I used on myself. So then, of course, a year later, I was a lot better. Out of bed, and people were suddenly seeing me again, and they were saying, well, what have you done? And I started to explain it, and they were like, well, that's amazing, you need to share this. So that's when 2017 was when I created Think Like a Tree. So it was first created as a program, which 6 years later is still running in pretty much the same format, which I think is a testament to the strength, really, of that nature-inspired framework, really, that it can be used for all sorts of issues, not just health, but people have used the Think Like a Tree program to design everything from a new career to they're looking after their kids, their retirement, absolutely anything, using this nature-inspired sort of process with the natural principles. And then in 2019, again, somebody said to me, you should write a book, and I was like, yeah, I really should. So I basically drew together the natural principles and did a lot more research into kind of biomimicry, systems thinking, regenerative leadership, so many different nature-inspired disciplines that are out there, and drew together the common strands that could be used in a personal development context. So that became 42 natural principles that were written up into the book Think Like a Tree, The Natural Principles Guide to Life. And so that's kind of the guidebook, really, for nature-inspired living for individuals. But what I found also was that I was working a lot with people who were either really, struggling in their careers, or they were setting up businesses, or they were wanting to, shift into a new shift from kind of working from an organization into becoming entrepreneurs. So I actually sort of, almost accidentally started to work with a lot more businesses, and then trained up several facilitators, one of whom was J.K. McQuinn, who it does a lot of work with organizations already. So together we founded the Think Like a Forest program, which is for businesses and organizations. So it's kind of like a natural evolution. But because I mean, it's kind of, it's magical really, because I set up, I didn't want to be kind of the boss of a big organization. That's not how I wanted to set up Think Like a Tree. So I wanted the flexibility. So I set it up like a mycelial network, like a forest. So that's what it's modeled on. So I consider myself to be, have you come across you must have come across like the mother tree concept or the hub tree concept in the forest, where, you've got like these key kind of maybe oak trees or something like that share, to have kind of a role in sharing nutrients and things like that. And then you've got the other trees and organisms around. So that's kind of how I set up with me as the hub tree. There can be equally other hub trees in the future. So everybody's got their own, each facilitator has got their own business, they've got their own interests. It means they can pursue the passions that they want. But of course, what they do is they bring their wisdom, their experience and their passions into Think Like a Tree. And then we form collaborations and run with whatever emerges. So it's incredibly exciting, as well as, being, a good way really to spread this message and way of working more widely.
I love it. So you have this network of facilitators that are helping people apply these principles of nature into their personal lives and now into their business. What would you say as you've worked through those instances, and maybe let's start off on like the personal level. If you could share just like the kind of experiential transformation that someone has. Maybe you could take a client. We don't have to name the client or whatever, but if you feel like they're fine with that, I mean, yeah, I would like to explore that from the personal side, and then maybe what it also looks like on the business side of kind of taking people through that type of process and the transformations that can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there are a lot of people out there who are experiencing, burnout and overwhelm, and maybe some like imposter syndrome in their work. And really, that is a very common thread. And what we know is that essentially we are living in a mindset, a paradigm, which is effectively just a collective mindset that we as humans just weren't designed for. So the current paradigm that we're operating in has only been around for, some people say kind of about 500 years since the scientific revolution that kind of reduced everything to reductionism and mechanistic ways of thinking. And I mean, you could perhaps say that the roots were back in the move to agriculture sort of 12,000 years ago. But anyway, whatever timeline you want to consider, essentially the way we're operating mostly at the moment is in this mechanistic mindset. So what we and how we evolved as humans was in a nature-inspired mindset, so a regenerative mindset. So when we bring people kind of onto our courses or, through workshops, we help them to kind of unpick and unlearn actually some of that mechanistic, modern, industrial thinking, and then replace it with the nature-inspired thinking. So to give you quite a concrete example, so a lot of the burnout and overwhelm and those kind of feelings come because of a lot of the labels and the ways of thinking that are designed by a mechanistic society. So that's labels that we might put on ourselves as lazy if we're not constantly on the go, that, you know, hustle culture, you know, hustle culture is a newer thing, but it's a real, you know, comes out of that mechanistic. If you're not hustling for something new, then somehow you're not doing it right. You know, that we should feel guilty if we're taking time to pause, and there's very little value placed on pause unless somehow it's being done in a relatively formulaic way. Like, yes, I can go and do my meditation or my yoga class, but again, it's sort of somehow it's ticking a box of I've done something. Do you know what I mean? I've achieved something in my yoga class today. You know what I mean? I'm not dissing yoga at all, but it's just kind of just to show how even when we're doing good for our bodies, somehow we're still stuck in that mechanistic mindset. And so what we do is actually help people to kind of unlearn and see, so how does, let's go out in the forest. Let's see how a tree approaches pause totally differently. So, if you look at an oak tree in winter, you don't go up to that oak tree and say, but it's a bit lazy. Should be doing more. How's he hustling? What's he doing? We don't do that, do we? We just accept that it's winter, and we accept that actually what we realize when we actually think about an oak tree and look at, really get to know an oak tree in winter, is there's a huge amount. The buds for the spring are already there. The groundwork that is going on underneath to keep the roots strong, to keep the branches safe from being, battered by the wind. But we don't put those mental labels on. But essentially, when we take time to pause, and that might be a pause, say, for example, when an organization comes to the end of a project, or it might be, if we've had a setback in our personal lives, or it might be simply that we experience, we definitely show up differently in different seasons, which of course most people have got really divorced from. If we can then embrace that idea of pausing and see it as productive, as setting, as having that really deep, nourishing rest that we need, and also setting us up for spring when we can unleash new projects, unleash new ideas, then what we find is that we are much happier. We avoid those kind of feelings of burnout and overwhelm. But we also then, when we do get going again, we're much more creative, we're much more innovative, we're much more productive. So, you can see by that mindset shift. And what happens when we shift our mindset, of course, is that our actions follow. So, we're not just talking about all sitting, come on a course with me, whether it be online or in person here, and sit around talking about this stuff. This has real practical applications that people take away into their own lives and just live in a very, very different way. And I have seen, just through that one natural principle, and there's 42 and there's 12 phases of a design cycle that we use, one of which is also pause. Then, we can see deep, that's kind of like the part of the deep roots of some really fundamental shifts that people make and take back into their lives.
And I think, you see a lot of people out here. And I just think of Western culture in the States, and I don't know European culture, but I assume it could be very similar in hustle and go. But even still, you look at the people that you feel have it dialed, or you also have to think that we're only seeing a bit of it. But the people that I truly look up to, at least, and I see I see some significant hustle in a lot of the work that they're doing, but then I also see just really good rhythms that they've found for themselves. And I think it exists in everybody, and the patterns that they see in their own life, they've started to figure out that this is who I am. This is the pattern that exists, the natural cadence of things. And then they see an ability to work with rather than against the rhythms that happen in their lives. Right. And that's something that I truly have been looking for a very long time. And I can't just say that I'm failing entirely at it, but I can't say that I'm also winning entirely at it. Right. There's always improvement in that type of space of improving and really truly recognizing the natural patterns that are happening and how your rhythm can be in tune with those. And that to me is very powerful if for someone to catch and to really be honed in and be empowered by, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll know, of course, that permaculture always starts with observation. So land-based permaculture, they always say start by observing the land for a year. That's the standard kind of permaculture phrase, but we do the same. So in the Think Like a Tree design cycle, which is a 12-phase design cycle that people work through step by step, we always start with observation. And the first group of natural principles in the book, 7 principles, are all about observation. And so we all need to get to know ourselves better. So there are so many different ways of observing, and when I talk about observation, I'm not talking about just with our eyes, using all of our senses, really getting deeply intuitive about what's going on inside of us. And also observing things for big picture and small detail, looking at long-term things as well, whereas we're so used to, in Western mindset, everything being really short-term. So, kind of the designing that I do in all of my life goes way beyond my lifetime. So my designs for Whistlewood, for here in our small holding, for my work, for my legacy, that's all way beyond my lifetime. And and it's really empowering to feel like you don't have to do it all now. You can create the ideal conditions. And then it doesn't have to just be you that is then building on that, So what I love is fertilizing the soil for other people. So, what's great is, in another world, you and I might see each other as competitors, for example. You're obviously not in that mindset. I'm not in that mindset. So we can fertilize each other's soil, and magic will happen, and that might be magic in both of our businesses. Probably that was the way, or, one or other, or whatever. But because we're kind of in service to this bigger endeavor, which is to regenerate life, then all of that kind of detail that people get bogged down in, and kind of like, the nitty gritty of like, he said, she said, no, that kind of what we call a scarcity mindset. That falls away, and living in a scarcity mindset is not really a very happy place. Whereas living in an abundance mindset, where you're constantly seeing the potential that can emerge out of a situation, rather than just kind of constantly thinking, oh, what have I got to gain from this, in that kind of, Western scarcity model. It's just deeply enriching and empowering. And I just want to share that with everyone. Do you know what I mean? Yes.
I totally agree with you. And it's hard. It's not easy to get ourselves from what has become a societal norm for most society. And if it's not, it's honestly something that has become idolized if we don't have that, right? If we're not hustling, or if we're not creating something, the world looks down upon you, or you feel that type of pressure, or to be a certain way and to exist a certain way. So you have a lot of stuff sometimes working against what these natural patterns that you're teaching. I know I want to spend more time talking about this, and just so the listeners know, we're also thinking about building a masterclass together, and working through and having a time where you share the things that you've become a master in helping people learn to use nature as a teacher for our personal lives and business. And so I want to caveat that, but I also want to just kind of take, and from what you shared about your story and how you kind of came into this place and helping entrepreneurs, I want to see if we can unpack some of the lessons that you've learned on the business side of things, and how you've built your business and applied the same principles that you've experienced in your life and your business. And what would you hope the entrepreneurs that are listening to this, that are possibly going through their own stresses of trying to fight through some of the challenges that our current culture has, that they're honestly in agreement that it's not working, right? That we need to change. What would you hope that they would take away from your story and the message that you've shared today?
So I'd love to just encourage any entrepreneurs to get out into nature and just try and experience those two elements. So one is that connection. So switch off the business part of your brain, or your brain in total if you can, and just be for a bit. Just 10 minutes or something will just change something in you physically. But then the second element is just be curious. And when you're out in nature, be curious about what you're seeing. What are the secrets of success that you're seeing around you in the forest? And then be curious about what you can learn from that for your own business, because we do have this mindset that everything's kind of a fixed pie, that we've got to just fight for our place, and whether that be within the culture of an organization, or whether that be with regard to resources. But when we look out in nature, we can see that there is no fixed pie. If you use regenerative principles, then the earth keeps growing. I'm constantly reminded of how all of this started from one bacteria, and it's kind of like, well, it just and we can be part of that as humans. We don't have to be the ones that are destroying. So within our businesses, we can be creating life. And so we can do that in a physical way, obviously, in terms of creating great, products and services that regenerate life. But we can also think about the cultures and the mindsets within our organization. So I would say bring that learning back in-house and be curious about the mindset that's showing up in your organization. Is it a scarcity mindset? Is it a creative mindset that's actually stressing people out because you haven't got the processes to underpin it, the strong roots, if you like? Is it efficiency, mechanistic, everybody's just cogs in a machine kind of mindset? Check your language, how that's showing up. Are you saying it, dial it back a little, or this mechanistic wording that comes out? And then just be curious about that, because like I say, it all starts with observation. And yes, I've studied this for many years. I've brought it in my business, but I really am passionate about the fact that anybody can learn this. And you can go out in the forest and see this stuff, and then just start bringing it back with that open curiosity into your business.
Oh, that's beautiful. So first, let's see if I can rehash the kind of the three pieces that you mentioned here. So first, just get out in nature, right? Spend some time, turn your mind off, and allow yourself to just be in nature. And then the second was getting remind me the second, because now I'm out.
Getting curious.
Getting curious.
Yeah, getting curious in the forest about what's going, what the secrets of successes are in the forest. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then being able to apply that into your business to see the curiosity, seeing the patterns and recognizing from that curiosity to see and recognize and apply that. Is that the third? Was that the third that I was kind of recognizing?
That's right. Yeah. And I think, the one thing that's sort of not being said is that human beings and organizations filled with human beings are not machines. So it's clearly the wrong metaphor, the wrong mindset that's being applied and has been applied for, quite a long time. So the living systems mindset, the living systems paradigm, the creating life paradigm, they're all the same words for the same thing, are essentially what humans evolved to do. So what we're doing is we're stepping forward into something new, but it's also something that when I do it with organizations, whether or not they're nature connected, then it has a certain familiarity, because we have that kind of innate biophilia that we evolve to be in nature, surrounded by nature, learning from nature. So it's maybe people listening will think, oh gosh, that sounds really odd and, a bit woo and a bit tree huggy or whatever the labels. But what I would say is just give it a go. I mean, there are plenty of regenerative, disciplines now where they're really showing the science and the research backing these things. So, let's give a shout out to all those people doing that really, really important work. And also give it a go, because the difference between, a regenerative mindset way of working is just streets apart from the problems that arise in that traditional mindset showing up in a business.
Well, it reminds me, I think there's kind of one story that kind of it comes to my mind of, a real life person that everybody kind of understands at least in our space, which is Rachel Carson, who wrote Silent Spring, right? And her way of doing things was to be involved and engaged in nature, and through an understanding and love for nature, was able to see that there was something not right, and seeing the challenges that the green revolution had brought with chemicals into our agricultural system and systems in general. That was all really established from a really strong understanding of being in nature, and just being able to see, and then through that be able to have a voice and share and have a passion to protect and value that. And so I think there's many ways of that, how that exists. Definitely she was like one of the, what we would say, like one of our first naturalists that we could observe and have an understanding of and be inspired by. But we could use that in so many ways just in our businesses of, what are the things that are unnatural. It could be something that helps us step away. Like, that just doesn't feel right. That's unnatural. Like, how can we apply more of what feels right and more of what feels natural into our personal lives and into our businesses?
Yeah, that's it. But I think that does come with a certain caveat, because it would be lovely to say that we would just kind of go over to this natural way of living and then everything would suddenly wonderfully fall into place. But actually, we've all been so programmed by this mechanistic way of being and living and whatever, running our businesses, that actually what might seem obvious and natural, it isn't anymore. So we have to dial back, we have to do the work and kind of really asking the deep questions. So a lot of what we do with businesses is go through, a set of questions with them where they really go deep and challenge some of the assumptions that are just widely held in their organization. So that might be assumptions about the world, but it might be assumptions about their particular ways of working. And so so we have to be a little bit careful about the natural label, because it's all a bit too complex and messy for that to be that simple, sadly. I mean, I think ultimately when we get there, then I think it is lovely and natural and simple, but it's that's why essentially I've created programs and frameworks and things so that people can really ask the questions, and it's not just me saying this is right and this is wrong. It's about the entrepreneurs and leaders and businesses finding what's right in their circumstances, but within this framework. So I hope that kind of makes sense.
I wonder if it's similar to the pattern that permaculture land designers and people that are using land in that type of design philosophy, they kind of see that the 10 years of the natural systems kind of not working with themselves, but after that 10 years, things become a little easier, right? Have you ever heard that? That kind of saying.
That's it. And
you design and you design first, you understand, well, you first got to observe and interact, and then design. And then once you have the design, it's going to take some years for those patterns, the natural patterns, to actually maybe take effect and become easier. But you're kind of working against the systems that are at hand, right? And you're helping them to break through to another side of things.
It's exactly that. So, there is work to be done up front, just like creating, like we've created a forest garden here. So there was a lot of work to be put in at the beginning. And now, 12 years later, I would say that we put in probably 8 to 10 hours a year in that forest garden, probably less than that even. And we have abundant food just there. Every time we go in there, we pick, nuts and fruits and leaves, and, there's abundant food in there, but for almost no effort. So it's exactly that idea in an organization. So yes, there's going to be observation, there's going to be planning, there's going to be looking at cultures and changing cultures, and changing culture can be really tricky. But essentially, once that's all, like you say, bedded in, then you've created the conditions for potential to emerge on its own. So I get lovely magical things pop up in the forest garden now. I had some beautiful wildflowers this spring. I've done nothing to do that. And the birds are coming in, and they're obviously then helping the biodiversity of the balance of pests and diseases in that space. And the same thing happens in your organization. So once you've put that groundwork in, and you've put the value in the people in the organization and empowered them to step forward when they have ideas or they see a problem that needs addressing, then that all then comes off the plate of the leader, whoever is in that kind of leadership management role, or business owner, whatever that label might be, because things are emerging naturally. And the converse of that is, of course, that we've got a huge, what we call quiet quitting thing going on. I don't know if that's happening worldwide or, in the UK, just lots of people who are just not empowered in their jobs, not, have jobs that could be great, but actually the way they're not heard, they're not, within those organizations, and therefore they just turn up and do the bare minimum and they go home again. Mm-hmm. Now think of all the potential that's being lost, and those leaders who in those management positions are losing out on all of that potential because they've not got that culture right.
Yeah, it's definitely a process, and I see this the work that you're doing is as integral to helping us move towards the more nature-based solutions in our personal lives and within our organizations. I really truly want to see these regenerative entrepreneurs and enterprises pick up and see the fruits of those systems working together, like your wonderful land that you've been developing over years. And so how can we follow what you're doing? How can we get engaged? How can we reach out to you? What are the ways that we can take part in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so if you head to the website, which is www.thinklikeatree.co.uk, you'll see various tabs. So, there's a tab for individuals, there's a tab for businesses and organizations, there's one for families as well. And you can find out about training as a facilitator as well, which we are now worldwide. So we have a Canadian facilitator. So that's so welcoming people from around the world as well. And so, head to the website. There's a huge amount of information. You can see some of the frameworks that we use with businesses and organizations and entrepreneurs. And within for those audiences, we've got various programs, one of which is online, launching in October. But in the meantime, we have got, so you're probably about the first people to hear about this, we have a mindset quiz on the website, which if you head to businesses and organizations and scroll down. So if you're curious about what your organization's mindset is, you can take our quiz and see, and it'll just give you some really good starting points to actually think about, just get curious about your mindset and think about what the implications are and how you can maybe shift to that regenerative way of working. And of course, you can follow me. I'm on LinkedIn, Sarah Spencer, and also Instagram, Facebook at Think Like a Tree. So I'd love to contact, and people get, email me, Sarah at thinklikeatree.co.uk. I get loads of lovely emails from people and I always love them and I always reply. So
yes. Well, thank you, Sarah. We'll definitely have those in the show notes and in the descriptions of the podcast. So head over to our website if you're looking for that information all in one place. But if you do have a moment to take that quiz, I suggest you do. Get thinking about this for your organization, for your personal life. Where can we also find your book as well?
So the book is either you can order from bookshops or you can find it on online bookstores, including the biggest one that I'm not going to name. And if you're in the UK, then you can I can post it directly out from my website as well.
Okay, great. So, the best way to support an author is to go straight to their website. Hopefully everybody knows that if you're in Europe and or UK and want to get that book shipped out. So thank you again, Sarah, for joining us. And thanks again, everybody, for listening to the podcast. Have a wonderful day.
Well, thanks, Josh.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. It really is a blessing and a pleasure to bring each episode to you. So what'd you think? If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review or follow us on the podcast platform of your choice. Each review really does help us to further the reach of this podcast and move our mission forward to build regenerative economies in every bioregion. If you have a suggestion or feedback for us, please let us know in the open and free Regenerative Business Economies Network, known as RegenBen, which is linked in the description and in the show notes of this episode. RegenBen also has an awesome community request form that allows you to suggest guests, register to be a guest on the podcast, and share your own regenerative entrepreneur startup story, or any other suggestion you may have for the community. Without your feedback and requests, this podcast and community wouldn't be what it is, so please let us know. Now, this may be bye for now, but remember, it doesn't end here. It has only just begun. The regenerative economies of the future start now with you.